All right, so this is going to be the oral history review for History 705. We're going to start off with the founder of the U.S. Veterans Memorial Museum. Sir, introduce yourself.
Well, my name is Randy Withdrow, and we first incorporated this in 1986, and we put a nonprofit corporation in then, and then I was on active duty until 97, so we really couldn't find a location for that until that time. And it's asking about what inspired me to establish this museum. Well, I'm a baby boomer, and my dad was 6'9", so he kept getting turned down for service, but I have an uncle that was in the first Cav in the Pacific and lost an eye, and won't really talk about it, but when he was here, he did open up quite a bit, and one of the things on display is a samurai that he had captured. So being in the shadow of these, it truly is the greatest generation. Like all my dad's friends and everything. My dad during the war worked for Republic Steel and then Goodyear, and then my mom came to work at Goodyear and during the war, and that's where they met. But I had asked her what did she do during the war, and her response just shocked me. She said, well, I made fuel cells for B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-24 Liberators, and you don't expect your mom to say something like that. But that's how involved everything was at the time. Everybody in this country did a part, and I think we owe them so much. And as I began to grow up and go to the other museums and things, I thought, wouldn't it be great if every community had something that honored their veterans? Because truly, in the case of World War II, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be here. We'd be speaking, we'd be dead. We wouldn't be speaking Japanese or German. They would have killed us all. So that their sacrifice and their service inspired me to. I wanted to do something, pay back. Now I served 26 years in the Army, but it was nothing compared to these things that the World War II veterans did. In the short period, some of them were only in 2 or 3 years, but that was incredibly intense. So they inspired me to do this. And I said then, well, I'm not going to have the millions of dollars to do it independently. And that's why I decided I'd go with a nonprofit, and then later we got the 501c3, and they were the inspiration for this. The people that went on.
So how did you start getting your putting your collections together? You didn't set your home first, right?
Right. What now?
You started building your collection at home first.
To begin with, my dad was big in Model A Fords, and then of course we had 1940 Fords and things like that. And I didn't know this, but when we found out that Ford made a huge number, 280 something thousand Jeeps during World War II, we said, we need to get a Ford Jeep.
Why not?
And yes, and then and we did. And then I always watched combat, and I said, I'd like to have a German helmet, and so I got a German helmet. And then my dad and I said, well, it'd be good to get the other World War II things and vehicles, since we were into that. And we were trucking along pretty good there, and he died early at 59 with a brain tumor. He had some head things from playing basketball when he was younger, and that caused that. So that kind of put things aside. But built in Gadsden, I built like a 50 by 100 building, and then I proceeded then to try to get one of each of the Jeeps and one of everything. The ultimate objective was to have one of everything that was in World War II. So the results of that, starting from him, is we have everything represented now in the museum, from a motorcycle, the Harley, and the Indian. Did you know Indian made them during the war? But all the way up through the all the Jeeps, the ton and a half, the deuce and a half. We have even an amphibious Jeep, which are kind of rare. We have. I was fortunate enough to be able to purchase from the Ford Museum. They auctioned off their concept vehicle for what became known as the Jeep, the pilot model GP serial number 1, the Pygmy, and they auctioned that off, and I was fortunate enough to get it. So that became the nucleus. Let's get the other prototypes, the Willis prototype, the Bantam prototype, and the Ford prototype. And we were fortunate enough to get the Ford prototype. They made 1,500 of them. Of course, they added on later in production. But that particular Jeep was featured in January 3rd, 1944 Life magazine, Civilians Buy First Jeeps. And it's about that Jeep, that GP, and how it came to be surplused out during the war. When they had thousands of the others, they began to surplus out the prototypes because they weren't standardized. And a big surplus dealer in Chicago got a number of them, redid them, and this mayor of a little tiny town, Lucas, Kansas, heard about it, called, took the train up, bought the Jeep, and drove it back to Kansas. And then years later, someone saw that article, checked, and they were still listed in the phone book. It was the guy's son, and they still had that Jeep in the barn, and he talked him out of it and subsequently sold it to a restorer, also in a small town in Kansas. And then I was able to get that from him. So it just went on and on and on until we had everything. And the reason for that, all these items of hardware, they're simply, if you will, training aids. They represent the service that they did. These are examples that people can point to, and they can see the history, the development, and also the service of it. So, yeah.
What's been some of the greatest challenges during the founding and the collecting?
Well, right. Like I say, we founded, I did the nonprofit corporation back in '86, but being on active duty couldn't do much. And then I built that building in Gadsden, was still on active duty, but that was to house everything. And there was the blizzard of '93. It collapsed that building. And I'm stationed in Washington, so I had to come down and basically excavate all the restored things, rent semi-trailers, put them in there. So the biggest physical challenge was trying to protect all of that stuff. And then, of course, we had a number of thieves that went in there. But then the next thing would be finding a location, because I've had several assignments of being a missile through Redstone, and I determined then that, wow, this is such an overwhelming community, we need to be in Huntsville to better be able to present this to the public. And this is a tremendous patriotic community. So then the challenge became finding a site, not being the millionaire. And this particular building was originally the hangar when it was the airport here. It was a general aviation hangar. But then when the airport moved to the Jetplex, this became a minimum security jail. And then they built the high-rise jail on up the parkway there, the real modern thing. And a city councilman who was also in the reserves mentioned, hey, they haven't earmarked this building for anything. Let's try to get it, let's do your museum there. And I thought, well, it's not very nice, but we don't have anything. It's better than what we had. So we made a try for that. And there was, I know this overlaps your other questions, but the big challenge there was from the mayor at the time. She opposed this. She wanted this to be only for recreation. And she even told the city attorney to find precedents where a museum was not recreation. But he was upstanding. He found several examples where museums are, and was forthright enough to tell her that. And then there was some opposition mounted to her, being that she was negative against the establishment of this, but it was connotated that she was also not supportive of the community,
Sure.
which is largely back to military, and look at Redstone Arsenal and NASA out there. So we did get the building originally in 2000, and then we were working on taking out all the stuff that was jail, and then 9/11 occurred, and when that happened, we said, you know, we need to do something. This is monumental. We need to show some patriotism. So we crashed and opened the museum on Veterans Day 2001 after that. But getting there was quite difficult, because first thing they had done is they took out the hangar doors because they didn't need them when it was a jail. And then we were fortunate enough, Alabama's 40 and 8, that's the World War I French boxcar, was at the depot sitting out, and the 40 and 8 people had restored it with the understanding it was going to go in the roundhouse that was down at the depot, but they didn't ever put it in there because they used a roundhouse for events and receptions and things. So they went to the city, who felt they owned that 40 and 8, and pointed out to them that it belonged to the people of Alabama, and they wanted it to come in here. And we had agreed that, yes, you have to, the 40 and 8, you have to sell that to the city, and they did. So our first challenge is having to have a huge door cut in there, and meanwhile, over the years, they'd run all these air conditioning lines and everything in there. All that had to be rerouted, because the car was the first thing we put in here, because we knew it wasn't going out, and it went to the back of the museum. So getting that thing was major challenge to that. But it happened, and we did get that, and now we've restored it again. And we had a French artist lady that was a wife of a sergeant major repaint all the plaques that go on them exactly like they should be. So it's one of the better 40 and 8s in the country. Yeah. So
moving on to the industrial growth.
Yeah.
How has has the mission of the museum evolved since you first started?
Well, we've started by, my focus originally was World War II. Mm-hmm. Like I said, you know, being the baby boomer and everything. But then I realized, well, to be representative, we need to tell the history of the country. So we then decided to go back to the Revolution and bring it forward through all the major events that happened there. And that's difficult too, because of the space limits that we had. But also, if we're going to do that, we should include things like Desert Storm and Afghanistan and the present things we're doing today to bring it forward. So that was a growth of the mission there, because we decided we need to at least expose people to all of the history, and that's a challenge. It is.
Okay. We've already covered a little bit about the decisions that shaped the museum, primarily weather, politics,
Yes.
finding a place.
Yes, and I wouldn't have thought politics would be involved in it, but I've now since learned that politics is involved in everything. Yeah.
And let's see, was there a time when you thought maybe the museum wasn't going to make it?
Was what now?
Wasn't going to make it?
When the mayor opposed it.
Oh, fair
Yeah,
enough.
because that would have killed it right then. She had proposed that it be under the interstate down by the down by the depot, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And the city councilman's response to that was, "Oh, you want to put the veterans like the homeless under the overpass?" And boy, that went over real well with the public. Yeah. So we as a 501c3, we can't engage in political activities or anything, but
Mm-hmm.
those that believed in it and supported it could and did, and that saved it right there. I think that when she did that, that was pretty much, she didn't get reelected after all these years. Yeah, and Mayor Battle, the present mayor, is very supportive. Well, obviously we see, but it would have been nice to be down by the depot, but not under the overpass. but there was just no footprint for it down there. So we kind of wanted to stick with this.
So shifting gears a little bit,
Yep.
how much and what kind of an impact have the local veterans made with your museum?
Well, because all of our people at the museum are volunteers. Nobody, we don't have any paid staff at all. And I felt that was necessary too, because you're gonna get into all the legal ramifications of, the unemployment, the workman's comp and all that. But by having volunteers, most of them are veterans. And so, now, I'm from Gadsden, which is 70 miles south of here. Most people here, and even people in Huntsville, are not from this area. But
Same
they,
here.
they are area people now. And that's why when you look out there, you see all 50 states. And that's because some people said, well, we're only about Huntsville. No, we're about veterans. And I don't, all these countries, veterans. And that's why after the years, we added the US to it, so people would understand that it's all of our veterans, not just a finite few. But the local veterans are the ones that have pitched in. And I say they're local because they're here now. And they've pitched in and made this happen. I couldn't do it. It's all done. I especially can't do it now, getting old and decrepit. But they're the ones that make it happen.
Okay. Could you tell me what you think the difference is between the Veterans Museum and a regular or a more traditional military museum?
Well, the focus,
Okay.
the focus here, a military museum, I guess, would be more focused on the hardware. We're more focused on the veteran.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the difference, I think.
So, okay, so now moving into collections and the interpretations, you already covered how your first things with getting the helmet and the Jeep and everything else. How has that changed since you've been in a building and now we're getting ready to expand as far as collections?
Well, that's a good point, because originally we were saying, wow, how are we going to fill this space? Now we're looking at it like, independent of the other building, we're out of space.
Mm-hmm.
So we almost have to try to restrict what we take in. Now, we'll keep this building, and it'll be aviation, and you'll have 27,500 square foot of display space in the new building. But when you start laying that out, version 3 of that, it's full. Because we got something like 12 major pieces that we don't have room for in here now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be a restrictive thing. You can't just continue to, unless it's something notable that represents something, we can't just keep stuff in this thing.
Well, I think personally that's the kind of problem you want to have. You have too much instead of not enough.
Yeah, it is. It's
Yeah.
a good problem to have, it is, and be able to do something with it. That's the other part of it, so, yeah.
Is there any single item or display that you feel represents the museum?
I think nothing's more representative than the Jeep.
Yeah, okay, I was thinking the same thing.
The
Yeah.
Jeep.
Uh-huh.
And because that was universally used, especially, we're talking World War II primarily, but that represents the spirit and the mobility and the tenacity and the usefulness and how that it was adapted to different things. And that's kind of the difference in the U.S. is that our troops are innovative, they're able to adapt and overcome, as they say. Whereas a lot of the others are lockstep, and that's what a lot of the countries, and that's what's hurt them, I think. And that, to me, I think it would be the Jeep.
When you have guests in the museum, how do you and we volunteers best approach the controversial things as far as
Well-
wars and
Well,
engagements?
it's like the Civil War.
Mhm.
You know, the memorial that was down by the courthouse, United Daughters Confederacy contacted us and said, "Hey, would you take that memorial?" And I said, "Well, certainly we could, but you need to know we're kind of out a little bit remote, and I would think that it might come to harm. But at the same time, I think we don't try to. It's history,
Right.
and it's a part of history. And if you forget that and push it aside like some are trying to do, then you've done everybody that was associated a disservice, because it's not a simple thing. And that's the Civil War, for instance, you know. And if everybody, nobody wants war, especially the main thing is the service members know. We don't go out and recruit these things. We're here to protect and defend our country. But if we're told to go to Vietnam to take these bad guys on, we do it. We have to do it.
That's
you
the
know.
job. Yeah.
And that's your difference. We don't hear this is a museum. It's not an interpretive thing that's put things in a particular perspective. You know?
And that is one of the things I noticed, and coming from a historian standpoint, it's you present the facts and you let whoever's
it.
looking make up their own minds.
You draw your own conclusions,
Mhm.
and as long as you draw them that the military is here to serve, and we're not a proponent of any of the actions. It's a civilian command authority, and that's part of it too. Yep.
What responsibilities do you think the museum has in shaping public memory?
Well, that's it. That's what our responsibility is. That's a good point. Because that's our obligation, is to preserve these folks' memories. You know, so that they live on through what we present here. And we got to do that fairly, and just like what we just said. And that's our endeavor to do. That's why we have that Hometown Heroes, which realizes it's a little amateurish and all that. That's because we have the people. You put your picture of your ancestor up there or whatever. Now we're going to try to clean it up some when we get over to the new building, but that's done by the people. That's done by the relatives, and that keeps their family member alive, if you will.
And it makes them feel more a part of the community. Too.
Exactly.
Speaking of the community and its impact, we talked about this a little bit, but how has the museum affected the Huntsville community?
I think it's helped. I think it has. I think it's given a focal point. We serve all of the different veterans organizations. We belong to the coalition, and we support their activities, and particularly the Madison County Military Heritage Commission. They didn't have a meeting place, a home. They're the ones that do the Hall of Heroes. That's down at the courthouse, and so we said, you guys, you come here and you can meet here, and do their selection and everything here. Likewise, the Military Order of the Purple Heart, we give them a home to, not a what we say it's a home, but we give them a place they can come and they meet, and they do that every month. So we're kind of helping provide them with a base that they can, and they're in turn helping the community, and they're recognizing the veterans. So yeah, I think it's something good.
Okay, so how does the museum engage with the younger generations?
Well, we're trying to get more and more involved in it, but the problem is the younger people, they're more computer oriented, and it's harder to reach. That's why pre-COVID we did have a lot of school trips, and that's what we want to do. And we've gone out to schools, we've done things, outreach, and the principle of that is for them to be exposed to the contributions of our service members. And that, I think, is a mission, and we try and are trying to get younger volunteers, and we've been pretty successful, but it's just hard to reach some of them. And we used to say when the school group comes through here, if 1 out of 10 gets it, you've succeeded, and anything better than that is better than that. Yeah.
So I know that I've been here when y'all pushed out to do a parade or something
Oh,
like
yeah,
that.
see, that's another thing.
Any other like outreach programs like that?
Oh, all the time.
Okay.
That's one of the problems is being able to meet the requests we get. The big thing, we have an open house on Veterans Day, and we're a major proponent now that most of the troops have left Redstone for putting things in that parade. I think last parade we had 30 things in there, either from the museum or with the museum. That's part of the military collectors. And then the end of this month, there's the AUSA, Association U.S. Army Global Conference at the Von Braun. We put on a display there. There is the car show, the Veterans Car Show thing at Cabela's in June. We display there. We take things to schools and bring people in here for that. So yeah, well, it's harder to do with the things, but the things represent the easiest thing to do to represent. It goes back to the Jeep. Is we've got a guy that we have like an annex, and he's got our restored Jeep, and then another guy's got another restored thing, and they take them to events. Same thing. Yeah.
So going back to the volunteers, which we are all volunteers here. How big a role do they play here?
Oh, we couldn't do it. It's a, like I said earlier, it's totally volunteer. So if you don't have volunteers, you don't have a structure.
You're hurting.
Yeah.
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 So, okay, now 2 more, and then we're going to wrap it up. What leadership qualities are essential in directing the museum? Being in charge, being the guy.
I don't know. It looks to me like you got to be patient, and that's the hardest thing. To be patient with some of these things and people and requests and things they want to do. And so you almost, that's the biggest number one thing is you got to be patient. And you also have to be focused, you know. I never said I was smart, but I did say I was persistent. And this is an overnight success. It just took 25 years.
So now our last question, we're going to wrap it up. What do you hope future historians will understand about the museum's origins and its purpose?
Well, I hope that they understand that the purpose is to honor our veterans and their sacrifices. And if you do that, we've succeeded. And that's the whole picture right there. Again, these things out here are just training aids, if they will, to educational things.
So that's all I have. Do you have anything else to add?
Nope.
All right. Well, thank you,
I
sir.
was born a poor white child.
Same here.